I think we can kind of move on to the last point about how to actually fix this kind of stuff, right? Like if you feel like you're stuck in this. And so this person wrote, how do I fix my bad spending habits and reset to stick to my budget? I've had a hard time breaking my spending habits. I'm not drowning in debt, but I'm also not improving when it comes to managing my money. Basically, I spend my entire paycheck before I even get it, meaning when I get paid, the entire check just goes towards paying off what I already spent. I always pay it off, but I end up with nothing to save or invest. I track every purchase in a spreadsheet, but even then that hasn't helped me overcome the mental side of spending too much. How do I actually stick to a budget? I have one written out, but not following it is where I'm struggling.
Yeah, I feel like this is a lot of how a lot of people are. I also feel like there was a time and a place where I was tracking every purchase I was spending, but I didn't really have a plan for my money. I was just sort of like seeing what happens with it. And yes, I also think a lot of people are like, the stuff that they're spending on is already being financed by their paycheck that's coming in on that Friday. And that's a really bad place to be. That's why whenever I work with people, I always tell them, we need to be living out of the budget, not living with like whatever's going into your account. Like it needs to be like, can you afford these things that are on your budget? Not like look at my checking account and see what I can spend out of there. Cause that's not accurate. I feel like a lot of people create budgets that aren't realistic. Or they have too many emotions around their budget. Yeah. So like they just don't want to like work with it. Whatever worked for me whenever I started this whole debt-free journey and got my shit together was just being honest with myself and really tracking everything. And then I took that, okay, did I want to be spending this? No. Okay, now I'm going to map out exactly where I want my money to, or, where I want my money to be going each month. I think you have to start there and really come to terms with what you want to be spending your money on and what you don't want to be spending your money on. They just seems like they have too much going on here and they've brought way too many emotions into it. It's pretty simple. What do you have coming in? What goes out? Save and invest the rest, whatever. I don't know. What do you think about this one?
I feel for this person because at this, I feel for them, but also at the same time, like you gotta just do it, like, cause on the one hand, like they're doing a lot of good things, right? Like they're tracking everything. They've written a really well-intentioned budget. They want to change their habits. But they just aren't, right? Like they're stuck in this space where their spending habits have control over them instead of having control over how they spend money. And I feel for that because that's a tough situation. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you are an adult. I bet the person writing this is 20s, 30, like they're an adult. They've been an adult for some time. At a certain point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, you cannot spend money on this anymore. And I think if you are writing everything down, that's a great place to start, by the way. I love that this person's doing that. I always tell people like, hey, if you want to take control of your money, that's the first place. Write everything down for a month. You'll see where all the holes are. After that, though, you got to be able to assess it and say, okay, I suck at these things. I suck at not spending money on eating out, or I suck at ordering too much DoorDash. It's okay to suck at these things, by the way. Point them out to yourself. And then you have to take a real long, like hard look in the mirror and just say, okay, like if you want to change, you have to change. Like if you want these things to be different, you got to stop doing them, and I think for a lot of people like stuck in this, like, yes, you should map out what your goals are, why you want to do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like the motivation, that thing is going to fluctuate, right? Like there's going to be points in your life where you have very high motivation, very low motivation. That's always going to be a constant, like constantly changing in your life. And I think you got to replace motivation with just having the discipline to say no, like looking at yourself and saying, I'm an adult. This is the plan. And an adult is someone who just follows the plan, like whether it feels good or it doesn't. Like, I don't know, at a certain point, you got to just kind of like, you got to just buck up and say, all right, it's time to change and it's time to follow a plan. And hey, worst case, you try this for a month, your life is terrible now all of a sudden, you can just go back to the way things were, or it changes you for the better. Yeah.
It reminds me of like whenever I started my debt payoff journey, like obviously I had to change a lot of things because now most of my paychecks were going towards debt rather than like financing stupid stuff that I didn't need to buy. You know what I mean? I feel like this person also needs to like, I don't know, they probably need to change like their mindset a little bit about their budgeting because I feel like they're almost like in a bad sort of mindset, like any spending is bad. It's like, if you have it budgeted out, what's the problem with spending it? You know what I mean? And as long as you're budgeting out things that you want to be spending on, then like I don't see the issue here. I think a lot of people get too mental with it. Like a budget is a restriction and all this stuff when really it's just telling you where your money can go, and I think that's a hard piece for people to sort of grasp is like, doesn't mean it's like all restriction. Like if you're mapping this out, then spend your money on it and don't feel guilty about it. There you go. You know, as long as you're, you know, they said they're not drowning in debt. So like, you know, what's the issue here? I don't know.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is people, like we had talked about this whole episode, they build up this lifestyle and they get so comfortable in that lifestyle. And then when they want things to change, it's going to mean like a pretty drastic change to their lifestyle. And that stuff just isn't fun. And I get that. And I think like, you know, like if you do have a hard time just telling yourself no, like I had said, having the right kind of goals, that's a really important part. Cause obviously you got to look at something and say, all right, am I going to go to Taco Bell today? Like if I am, that's going to push me further from my goal. Like, am I okay with that? You got to be able to have that internal conversation with yourself. At the same time too, I think like little wins go a long way, you know, and little victories can compound over time to be, you know, massive changes, you know, like you move an inch a day and before you know it, you've moved like hundreds of feet or a mile in a new direction. Right. I think for someone like this, like you had said, not having a realistic budget can really set you back. I think like, all right, you know, if you notice you're spending, because you track it every single month and you spend, you know, $500 on eating out, on the next month, can you just spend $450 or $400, you know, like introduce some like discomfort and some pain in smaller doses so you can get comfortable with that. You can build up the confidence. And then, you know, before you know it, you've done that for long enough time and you've actually moved quite a bit in the right direction. Yeah.
It's like, I always say that, like when people try their first budget, they like think they're going to be a different person the next month, and they immediately like cut their restaurant budget to zero or close to zero. And it's like, how about just start like small incremental changes, get that muscle working, and then you'll slowly see like the change you want. Now, for my example, like I'm actually very, very disciplined. I think that comes from like my gymnastics background, but I did do everything. I cut it all cold turkey. I didn't buy clothes for like 3 years. I did not have a restaurant budget. I had $100 per month that I could, if something were to pop up or I had like something extra, I could take it from that money, but that was about it. But not as many people are, you know, disciplined with that. So yeah, make the small changes and figure out what you actually want to be spending your money on. I think a lot of people, at least for me, like when I started this whole thing, I was like, I'm spending money on things that I don't want to be spending money on. So, you know, thinking about and creating a plan for actually what you want to spend your money on. And again, be an adult and say no to the rest. Like you have to make a decision somewhere. And I think we all just like, we just feel so entitled that, I just can't say no to this and that. Yes, you can. You just have to. You know what I mean? The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.